Good morning, everybody. Did you enjoy your breakfast this morning? Who was here for breakfast? I especially enjoyed my scrambled eggs. Thank you, Arpi. What day is it tomorrow? Oh, some of you clearly have remembered. That's nice. Some of you, I'm a little concerned, especially one of my own, but that's all right. I'm sure you'll get there by tomorrow. So this is, theoretically, this is a Mother's Day message, but I just want to make clear this is not just for mothers, so don't switch off if you're not, in that group. But it is based on the woman that I most admire in the Bible and her journey to motherhood. But I hope that the lessons in it will apply to us all. Thank you, Letty, for praying. I can't see where you've ended up. Oh, thank you, Letty, for praying. I am going to pray again because I just feel the need. Okay. Father God, thank you so much that we can be here together this morning to spend this time with you. I just ask that as we go through this message today, that you speak to us, speak to our hearts, help us to be brave and courageous and open to hear what it is you're saying to us and what you would like us to do, how we can respond. I ask in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, loss. That might not feel like a very auspicious place to start a Mother's Day sermon, but if you think about it, a new life always starts with a loss. The moment a baby leaves their mother's body, they have lost everything they ever knew. All sense of comfort and familiarity is gone. And almost the first thing that happens is the connection between mother and baby is literally cut. But as that new life adjusts to loss, usually with a very vocal protest, the loss makes room for a new reality. The baby discovers that the mother whose voice they still recognise also has the most beautiful face they've ever seen. The embrace of the womb is replaced with the embrace of the mother's arms, but also with the arms of other family members and friends. Some babies don't like that too much, but as parents, we know that this forward movement into the future is what's best for our child. They obviously can't stay in the womb forever, aside from the fact that that would be very impractical. They would miss out on so much. This process of loss is repeated as they get older, perhaps when they're weaned or start their first day of school. They must move on from the comfort of their familiar relationship to a new independence. Some thrive in these moments. Some really struggle to let go. I'm not sure which is worse for their parents. Do we want our children to not need us anymore? Of course not. But we wouldn't hold them back either, would we? We want them to grow and thrive and embrace their new reality. Still, we recognise that there's a change in relationship at these pivotal moments. It feels like we lose something that we won't get back. As they get older, there are other losses in store. Our relationship with our child changes yet again as they become teenagers. Perhaps they don't want us to hug them publicly anymore, or maybe even at all. As they grow older, they no longer share all their intimate concerns with us. The time comes when their heart belongs to another. Eventually, they're ready to fly free of us and head into their future as wonderful, independent individuals. In our family, we've had 4 children do this, 3 just this year. This is what we want for them above all else. It's what we've been working towards from the moment they were born. Ironically, we work to bring this loss into our relationship. It has to happen. It's for the best. We're even really happy and proud of them, but it's still a loss. Our relationship will never be the same. And so even in the midst of our happiness, we might grieve a little. For all of us, loss becomes an uneasy companion as we journey through life. Loss takes many different forms. It could be the loss of a relationship with a loved one, whether that be a human or a pet. And it might happen through distance, a change in the relationship, or a broken relationship, or even death. It could be loss of place if you've moved to a new home. I know when Tony and I moved from Lindisfarne to South Arm, I grieved the loss of the home I was leaving, even though I was really looking forward to our life in our new home. I stood on the lawn on moving day and cried because I would never live in that house again. Many of you have moved much greater distances than that. Perhaps new cities, states, or even countries. I imagine that the sense of loss is compounded when you're moving towards something unfamiliar, or when it wasn't your choice to move. Perhaps when you no longer hear your language spoken around you, or no one knows how to say your name. Sometimes loss can be less tangible. Loss of innocence, the loss of trust when someone hurts us or lets us down, the loss of a dream, the loss of the future we thought we'd have because something major has shifted in our life's direction. Sometimes along with these losses comes opportunities, a crossroads that helps us evaluate what's really important, a door being opened to a new adventure. Like a baby being born, loss is not just about what we're leaving behind, but also what we're moving towards. I'm sure you've been able to identify with at least some of these losses. Some losses ask us to embrace change. I don't like those ones. Others bring their own kinds of grief. It's not always easy to get comfortable with loss and grief, is it? I guess that's because God didn't design us with loss in mind. So where did loss come from? The first loss is found in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve turned away from God to go their own way. As a result, they lost their relationship with God and hid from him afraid. They lost their home as they had to leave the sanctuary of Eden, and they lost their innocence and felt shame and guilt for the first time. And as death entered, they even lost their future. But the first loss wasn't just theirs, it was God's. He knew the pain humanity was bringing on itself and the damage that would be done to the world he'd created. He also knew what it would cost him down the track to make things right, and I'm sure he grieved those things. But I suspect his greatest grief was the change in humanity's relationship with him. The loss of the innocent enjoyment of each other's company. There would be no going back. The relationship would never be the same. During this time of grief, God called Adam and Eve to draw near to him. As he shared the consequences of their decision, he also spoke words of mercy and comfort. He took on himself the responsibility for restoring what was lost. This is grace, that God refuses to leave us empty, but instead pours out his love and mercy to give us a future with hope. And so we journey through life with our uneasy companions, loss and grief, but also with our greatest companion, God and his grace. Today I want to share with you a story about the woman I most admire from the Bible. Her name means grace. She was a woman acquainted with loss and grief, but the way she handled it was quite extraordinary. I don't share her story today as a judgment on how we should grieve or handle loss. That's a very personal thing. I share her story because I think there's something we can learn from her that might bring some hope into those difficult times in our lives. I pray today that you will find comfort and hope in her story. This is the story of Hannah. And you'll find her story in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And we're going to read that Bible passage today. It won't be on the screen, so if you want to look it up in a Bible and follow along, you can. I will be reading it out as well, so that's fine. I'm reading from the New Living Translation today. So while you look that up, 1 Samuel chapter 1, I just want to share some context. Hannah's story happens at a challenging moment in history, at the end of the period of the Judges, when every man did as he pleased because there was no king. The Israelites were a theocracy. God was their supreme ruler. His law was their constitution. But they were very up and down spiritually, turning to God in their difficult times, but indifferent during their times of peace, taking on the religion and culture of the neighbouring nations. Okay, let's start reading the story of Hannah. So 1 Samuel chapter 1, and I'm going to start reading at verse 1. There was a man named Elkanah who lived in Ramah in the region of Zuph in the hill country of Ephraim. He was the son of Jeroam, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph of Ephraim. Elkanah had 2 wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not. Okay, in those few words, Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not, is summed up a world of hurt. Not just the sorrow Hannah might have felt for the children that she wished she could have, but also because in her culture, to not have children meant you were a failure. You had failed your husband and brought disgrace on his name, and society would look down on you. Everybody around you would think less of you because you had not provided children. So imagine for Hannah what that experience is like. But then we find out Elkanah has a second wife. Now for us, we feel really uncomfortable with that. But in the culture at the time, it was thought a not unreasonable way to handle childlessness, because it was really important to have a child. You lived on through your descendants. The inheritance of your land needed to carry on to your descendants. This was so important that they believed it was okay to acquire a second wife if they had enough money to do so as a way to handle this problem. The Bible, whenever it shares stories where someone has gained a second wife in order to deal with a problem, the Bible always shows that it is a disaster. It is very much not God's plan. And as we read this story, we're going to find out that it was indeed a disaster for Hannah. Let's continue reading from verse 3. Each year Elkanah would travel to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of Heaven's armies at the tabernacle. The priests of the Lord at that time were the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas. On the days Elkanah presented his sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to Peninnah and each of her children. And though he loved Hannah, he would give her only one choice portion because the Lord had given her no children. So Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Each time Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. Okay, you might have noticed if you're reading a different translation to me that in your Bible it says Elkanah gave her a double portion. And this is because the Hebrew system of numbering is often really hard to figure out. But regardless of whether he only gave her one portion or gave her a double portion, the point is the portion he gave her singled her out for not having a child. Whether it singled her out positively or negatively, it singled her out. And as a result of that, she was taunted by Peninnah. And this happened year after year, every time they went to worship. Imagine every time you came to church, someone taunted you. Have you ever been taunted? It's an awful feeling, isn't it? and for that to go on and on. Hannah's response, we can see she is clearly distressed, but she doesn't retaliate or lash out at Peninnah or Elkanah or even God. And I really admire that about her. Okay, let's read verse 8. "Why are you crying, Hannah?" Elkanah would ask. "Why aren't you eating? Why be downhearted just because you have no children? You have me. Isn't that better than having 10 sons? I don't know about you, but generally when I read that, I kind of think, oh, Elkanah, I know you're trying to help, but it just doesn't sound like the right way to go. It sounds to me like he's kind of minimizing what she's going through. And I actually used to feel quite grumpy with him when I read this story. But as I've been mulling it over this week, I've noticed something else that I hadn't noticed before. You see, Elkanah is asking Hannah not to define herself by what society thinks or what Peninnah says, but by his love for her. He has not withdrawn his love as his society would have expected. He's asking her to define herself by her worth to him. Now that I've grasped that, I think, oh, that sounds like my Father in heaven, who wants me to define myself by my worth to him. Okay, reading on from verse 9. "Once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli the priest was sitting at his customary place beside the entrance to the tabernacle. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. And she made this vow, 'O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime, and as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut.'" So Hannah turns to the Lord. The tabernacle is where God's presence dwelt. So she's getting as close as she can to God and pouring out her heart to him. And she calls him, "O Lord of heaven's armies." That word Lord in Hebrew is Yahweh. And Yahweh is a special name that was given by God for people to remember him by. It affirms that they are his people and he is their God. This is a special covenant relationship, like a marriage or adoption. It brings God and his people into an intimate relationship by choice. The name also reveals God's identity as the God who is actively present with his people, as seen in the way he rescues his people over and over. And it also signifies his holy character of compassion, love, mercy, and justice. Just imagine for a moment what those characteristics would mean to Hannah at this moment. Yahweh is still all of those things for us today. Which of those qualities means the most to you right now? We read that Hannah makes a vow, and you can't help thinking, is she making a bargain with God? I'm not sure I'm very comfortable with that. But I don't think that's exactly what's happening. I think she is yielding her situation, so much so that she is willing to return God's gift, her son, back to God. She is acknowledging that only God can achieve what she's asking, and that the son she hopes to receive belongs to God more than her. Let's read on from verse 12. "As she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her. Seeing her lips moving but hearing no sound, he thought she'd been drinking. 'Must you come here drunk?' he demanded. 'Throw away your wine.' 'Oh, no, sir,' she replied. 'I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged. And I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think I'm a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow." "In that case," Eli said, "go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him." "Oh, thank you, sir," she exclaimed. Then she went back and began to eat again, and she was no longer sad. Notice all the words used to describe Hannah's state. She's discouraged, she's in great anguish and sorrow. As if Hannah's distress isn't enough, now she's falsely accused by Eli. Instead of finding relief, her distress is only added to. But again, she is humble and respectful as she defends herself. Thankfully, Eli believes her and blesses her with peace and success in having her request granted. And Hannah is no longer distressed or sad. Were Eli's words enough to inspire her with confidence? Or was it yielding her burden to the Lord that filled her with peace? Have you ever been encouraged by someone else? Have you ever experienced God's peace in a special way? Okay, reading from verse 19. The entire family got up early the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. Then they returned home to Ramah. When Elkanah slept with Hannah, the Lord remembered her plea, and in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, "I asked the Lord for him." The next year, Elkanah and his family went on their annual trip to offer a sacrifice to the Lord and to keep his vow. But Hannah did not go. She told her husband, "Wait until the boy is weaned. Then I will take him to the tabernacle and leave him there with the Lord permanently." "Whatever you think is best," Elkanah agreed. "Stay here for now, and may the Lord help you keep your promise." So she stayed home and nursed the boy until he was weaned. So Hannah receives her son, and we rejoice with her. But we also know there's a vow hanging over her head. She remembers her vow and she doesn't back down from it. But I wonder how she felt about it. Did she regret it? Or dread the time when she must go through with it? Have you ever made a promise you regretted afterwards? Hannah had another reason not to go through with her promise. It turns out that Eli's sons were really wicked. We read about that in chapter 2. We're not reading that part today. But it seems that Eli wasn't exactly great father material. He wasn't really who you would choose to raise your only much longed for child. And his sons weren't going to be good influences either. So where was Hannah's commitment to her vow coming from? I think it was coming from a heart that was really grateful. And from her faith that God would care for her son. Her trust in God outweighed her fears. I really like Elkanah's words of encouragement. He understood how difficult it would be for her to go through with her vow, but he didn't try to tell her what to do. He just asked God to help her. Okay, let's read from verse 24. When the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. They brought along a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour and some wine. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. "Sir, do you remember me?" Hannah asked. "I am the very woman who stood here several years ago praying to the Lord. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. Now I am giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life." And they worshipped the Lord there. So when the child was weaned, she took him. That was probably around 3 years old. Is that enough time to spend with your only child? Is it enough time to store up the memories that must get you through the rest of your life? Is it enough time to instill in your child everything you want him to know, or the values that will steer him and a knowledge of the Lord? Will your child remember you? Will he understand why you have left him behind? For me, the answer to nearly all of those questions is an emphatic no. How did Hannah go through with it? This is the question that repeats over and over for me when I read this story. How did Hannah go through with it? We find out that Samuel would serve God in the tabernacle as his priest. What was this moment of parting like for mother and child? Think about what it's like to send your child off for the first day of school and then imagine that they're never coming home again. There is one part of the story that would amuse me if I could reconcile myself to Hannah's loss. I can't help wondering what Eli thought to be suddenly saddled with the care of such a young child. So how did it work out for Hannah and Samuel? If you turn over to chapter 2, I'm going to read 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 18 to 21. But Samuel, though he was only a boy, served the Lord. He wore a linen garment like that of a priest. Each year his mother made a small coat for him and brought it to him when she came with her husband for the sacrifice. Before they returned home, Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord give you other children to take the place of this one she gave to the Lord." And the Lord blessed Hannah, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. I'm sure it was really difficult for Hannah to only see Samuel once a year. You know, I read about her making the small coat, and there's just something in my heart that thinks, oh my goodness, how hard that must have been. I really like that God doesn't leave Hannah empty. He gives her a family. But I also know that this doesn't necessarily erase the pain of her losses. Yet along with the sense of loss, we know Hannah feels joy for what God has done for her. She actually sings a song to God, and you can read it in chapter 2. Sometimes joy and grief sit together in our heart. Samuel grows up to play a pivotal role in the turbulent history of the time for his nation. He becomes a really strong spiritual and political leader, which was what they needed at that time. God had a plan for Hannah that she couldn't possibly have known in her time of distress. And through her, he had a plan to bless the whole nation and give them another opportunity to draw close to him and experience the blessings he wanted to pour out. So what do I admire so much about Hannah? Well, all the things I'm going to share with you are qualities that I struggle to have, and I think that's why I admire them so much. First of all, her humility, her refusal to bite back at the people who hurt her. The way she turned to God in her distress and left her burden with him. Her faith that God would help her both to have a child and to give up her child. And her willingness to sacrifice and give back wholeheartedly to God. Hannah's story makes me question, could I do what she did? How about you? But it also makes me question, how did God do what she did? How hard was it for God to give up his son? For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only son so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. He gave his one and only son. We read this verse all the time, but do we really comprehend the love that God's gift of his son shows us? the level of sacrifice it was for him to give up his only beloved son. I can't comprehend Hannah being able to do that, but for God it must have been even more difficult. You see, I'm thinking about the sense of loss I felt recently as my children left, but they left for good things, for new opportunities. It's one thing for me to release my eldest son, for example, into the care of his new wife who loves him. How much harder would it be to release a son to a life of hardship, like God did, to people who would treat him badly, who would criticize, betray, humiliate, torture, and kill him? Could you give a loved one away in such circumstances? That's what God our Father did. What was that moment like when Jesus left heaven? How did the Father feel? Did the angels look on in awe of God's graciousness to go through with this plan? The Bible shows us that Jesus agreed with this plan. He gave himself willingly. "No one can take my life from me," he said. "I sacrifice it voluntarily, for I have the authority to lay it down when I want to, and also to take it up again." But he gave up even more than his life. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. So he gave up his home in heaven, his equality with God, and his divine privileges. Stop and think about that for a moment. Could you give all of that up for people who mostly were apathetic to you? Or worse, people who were actively against you? Jesus went from a life of peace and love in heaven to one of sorrow and hardship on earth. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. We turned our backs on him and looked the other way. He was despised and we did not care. We did not care. Is that true for us today? Are we a bit complacent about what Jesus went through for us? Despite all of these losses and our lack of appreciation, he chose to identify himself with us permanently. Therefore, it was necessary for him to be made in every respect like us, his brothers and sisters, so that he could be our merciful and faithful high priest before God. Since he himself has gone through suffering and testing, he is able to help us when we are being tested. He lives forever to intercede with God on our behalf. Jesus considers himself our bridegroom. He is looking forward to the time when he can celebrate the marriage feast with us. Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb. Marriage is a permanent commitment as long as life shall last. In this case, forever. Jesus committed to a permanent relationship with us, even though that meant his relationship with his Father would change. Why did they both do that? How did they both do that? Why did they both choose to lose so much? Love. It was because of their great love for us. The grief they felt over what we have lost since sin entered our world was greater than the grief they felt over what their own losses would be. Everything they have done was to restore our losses. We lost our relationship with God, but they've provided reconciliation. We lost our place in this in this world as this world has changed and not been the home that God intended it to be. But God is offering us heaven and a new earth. We lost our innocence, but through the process of justification, just as if I've never sinned, our innocence is being restored. We lost our future, but now our future is forever. Here's a beautiful picture of our future. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death, or sorrow, or crying, or pain. All these things are gone forever." And the one sitting on the throne said, "Look, I am making everything new." How will we respond to such a picture of God? A God who has put himself through so much grief in order to rewrite our future and give us hope. Have we become complacent about the enormity of God's love for us, like the people who lived in Hannah's time, the time of the judges? Or can we be so grateful for God's gift that we would be as self-sacrificing as Hannah? What would that look like? What could you freely offer God? Time? Love? Service? If we think about the grief God has felt at our broken relationship with him, I think the response he would like best is our heart. Our whole heart, devoted to knowing him better and walking through life with him on the path he chooses. If that is something you would like to do and you're not sure how to go about it, please speak to someone here at Rosny. We'd love to support you on that journey. But another way of responding, how do we respond to grief and loss? When we go through a tough time, we need our support network. Who was Hannah's support network? Her family, Elkanah? How did he handle things? Her church family, Eli. How did he handle things? How confident are you to support someone in a time of distress? If you're anything like me, the answer is not at all. I recently attended a workshop on how to deal with grief, and our facilitator said the goal of spending time with someone who is grieving is not to make them feel better with the perfect words. So we need to take that pressure off ourselves. Rather, the goal is connection. Are we willing to join them where they are? I know that can be confronting and challenging, but if we think about it, this is exactly what Jesus did for us when he joined us here on earth, and he can help us do that for others. I like the slogan in the Palliative Care Tasmania Grief Guide, where they say, "Connection over perfection." So there are no perfect words to say, but there are some phrases that might be helpful starting places for a conversation. How are you doing today? Keeping it specific is less overwhelming than a general "how are you going?" Is it okay if I keep checking in with you each week? I've been thinking of you. I don't have the right words, but I'm here for you. I think if we're going to say that one, we have to follow through. I'm so sorry for your loss. And here are some phrases that are maybe a little less helpful, but if you have said these things, don't beat yourself up about it. I think we've all said them. I know I have. Anything that begins with "at least." At least they lived a long life. I've had people say to me, "Oh, you're really sick. At least you look good." Thanks. I know it comes from a good place in people's hearts, but it's maybe a little less helpful. They are in a better place now. Just stay strong. It was meant to be. Ouch to that one. Just give it time. I would love it if our church was a place where people could find comfort in the difficult times of life. And I know many of you are already providing this kind of support. If you would like to learn more about supporting someone in a time of grief, there are some resources available on these websites. palcaretas.org.au, that'll take you to the Palliative Care Tasmania website, and learningthroughloss.org.au. It has some great resources for children as well. Hannah's ultimate support was God. I like the way she found comfort and peace by turning her cares over to God. Here are some reasons why I think we can trust God with our pain. First of all, he truly gets it. A God who gave up his son, a God who chose to live this life just like us, understands our pain. And he refused to leave us here to suffer loss alone. Also, he walks with us. When we are overwhelmed by grief, burned by loss and pain, he walks with us so that those things will not overcome us. When you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. God truly cares. He even measures our tears. You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. Our pain means something to God. And finally, he offers us hope. Think of everything he has done to make restoration and reconciliation our forever story rather than loss and grief. So based on all of this, I believe we can be confident to pour out our hearts to him, knowing that he cares, understands, and will intercede in whatever way is best for us within his plan. We can turn to him in all our circumstances. Turn to him first. Why don't we do that? Hannah suffered a long time before she turned to him. We can trust God's plans even when we can't see the outcome or understand what's going on. Loss is not just about what we're leaving behind, but what we're moving towards with God, held in his hands. And we can yield ourselves and our circumstances truly to him. Did having more children make up for Hannah's time of childlessness? Did it make up for not being able to watch and care for Samuel as he grew? I don't know that it could have. Although God doesn't leave us empty, the new blessings that come into our life don't necessarily make the initial losses okay. They don't always wipe out the trauma that is sometimes associated with those times in our life. God isn't saying that our pain doesn't matter. Rather, he is offering to share our pain, sit with us in our grief, walk with us through our times of distress, offer comfort, and when we are ready, give us hope. This hope is the restoration of our relationship with him, a beautiful, peaceful world to be our home, and a forever future. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. To make this hope possible, God gave up his son. Jesus gave up his beautiful, peaceful home, took on humanity, and permanently identified himself with us. He suffered, died, and rose again, defeating our great enemy, death, and paving the way for us to live forever with him. No more suffering, just an unbroken, loving relationship with him and with each other. If that is a future you would like, I invite you to open your heart today to the gift of hope that God is offering you. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance. Therefore, I will hope in him.